A remote archipelago lies off the coast of Africa. Islands at the edge of the world, they were once called. They were taken by Spanish conquistadors on their way to America. Today, they attract millions of tourists each year. Human history has certainly left its mark. But the 7 islands still have their wild side. Sand dunes, forests, volcanic peaks, lava deserts. Far from other continents, unique landscapes have developed on the Canaries. It all started 20 million years ago. Deep in the Atlantic, something is brewing. Volcanoes erupt on the seabed. The Earth's crust pierces the surface of the sea. The Canaries were born of fire and have yet to settle. In the beginning, a volcanic island devoid of life. Within months, bacteria invade the naked rock. Algae and lichen follow, green on the black lava. The world of the Fire Mountains, the visible beginnings of life itself. Mount Teide rises almost 4,000 meters above the sea. It's a sleeping giant. It last erupted in 1909. Innumerable eruptions created one of the world's great natural wonders. Volcanoes, craters, and hardened lava streams merge in a rugged, forbidding landscape. While the islands were a glowing desert of hot mud, the ocean floor teemed with life. But below the surface too, volcanoes are unstable habitats. Hot gases can escape the Earth at any time, poisoning the surrounding water. Immobile life forms meet an untimely end. Ancient creatures continue to inhabit this strange netherworld. Many are bizarre and mysterious. When cold water meets molten lava, the result can be powerful explosions that sink entire coastlines, or complex networks of underwater caves stretching far inland. These caves are home to sea creatures that prefer the dark. Isolated from the outside world, surreal life forms have developed in a submarine cave on Lanzarote. Tiny white crabs, barely a centimeter long, completely blind. Rays have inhabited the seas since ancient times. As have these bizarre angel sharks. As the islands rose from the seabed, these creatures had to adapt to their changed environment. More and more species emerged from the deep. The island of El Hierro rose just 1 million years ago, making it the archipelago's youngest and smallest island. It was home to an animal whose ancestors came from Africa, but now has one last refuge. Tiny, inaccessible, Roca Chico de Salmor. It's hard to believe any animal could exist here. But there is one. It is the El Hierro giant lizard. Between 150 and 200 of them live on the barren rock. They grow to more than half a meter despite the apparent lack of food. The sparse vegetation shouldn't support so many lizards, and yet these animals even find the energy to reproduce here. The cliffs of Lagomera rise out of the sea like a desert mountain range, dry and hot. At higher elevations, however, the island's appearance changes. Shrouded in deep mist, a living fossil has survived, the Monte Verde cloud forest. Laurel trees grow close together, forming an impenetrable thicket. The forests are a remnant of the Tertiary era, the last of their kind on the planet. A rare bird inhabits the lower level of the forest where the vegetation is thinner. The laurel pigeon. Like the forest itself, the pigeon is also a living fossil. It arrived from Africa when the Canaries were young. Cut off from the mainland for 20 million years, it can only exist in this restricted habitat. Of course, the animal most associated with the islands is the canary. This is its original ancestor, the Atlantic canary. Spanish explorers took the bird to Europe for its beautiful song and as a symbol of luxury and sophistication. Canaries like sweet things. They were once known as sugar birds. Today's canaries are still drawn to the ripe fruit of the arbutus tree. The fruit they drop is left behind for others. For example, the common chaffinch. You can't be too selective on an island surrounded by the ocean. Resources are scarce. You just have to adapt. From afar, it looks like a lush green paradise. But the area around El Teide is a barren volcanic desert. Freezing cold, blistering heat, thin, dry air, and powerful ultraviolet rays are the lot of this volcano. The Mount Teide bugloss can withstand the difficult conditions, growing a tower of red blossom 3 meters high. But it only manages this once in its life. The more flowers, the higher its chance of being pollinated by passing insects. All its energy focused on this one hope of creating the next generation. Far from the mainland, different species developed with very specific abilities. On a rocky outcrop on Tenerife lives one of the most endangered plants on Earth. Lotus maculatus. There are just 11 left in the world. This plant entered into a unique partnership to survive with a reptile. The lizards feed on the plant's blossoms. The sweet nectar of the Lotus maculatus is especially tasty. The secret of the plant's survival? Its pollen is located on the tip of the blossoms. When the lizard stretches for the nectar, pollen is brushed onto its head. The lizard then moves on to the next plant and pollinates it. Without the lizards, Lotus maculatus couldn't reproduce. It would vanish forever. Life on the Canary Islands is dominated by lava and ash. At the foot of the volcanoes is neither water nor fertile earth. And yet a tough fighter survives, the Canary Islands pine. This tree uses a strong taproot to anchor itself to the ground. Additional roots spread out in a wide network to gather nutrients from a broad area. Because the root systems are so expansive, there's plenty of space between the trees. The sparse pine forests around Mount Teide are home to a bird whose origins remain shrouded in mystery. The Tenerife blue chaffinch. The plumage of the males is a striking shade of blue. The chaffinches prefer mountainous regions, building their nests in the largest, oldest pines. And they're not the only birds here. These sparse forests are also inhabited by African blue tits and woodpeckers. This young blue tit can already fly, but it still depends on its parents for food. The chaffinches, on the other hand, will breed later in the year. These females still have time for minor disputes. Finally, the moment arrives. Pine cone season. The seeds of the pine trees are rich in protein. The chaffinches have matched their breeding season to the life cycle of the trees. In summer, ripe cones fall to the ground. It's easy for the birds to get to the nourishing seeds. This is the perfect time to rear their young. At heights of 2,000 meters and more, giant Canary Island pines withstand cold, heat, and drought. But living in a volcanic neighborhood can be extremely dangerous. glowing lava ignites whatever it touches. Volcanic eruptions destroy everything in their path. Fires spread unhindered, scarring the landscape. Once the fire has run its course, the full extent of the destruction becomes apparent. The Canary Island pines are the only life left standing. Their bark protected the sensitive pith. The secret of their survival lies in their needles that burn up fast and then extinguish. The flames have nothing to hold on to in the sparse forest and pass on. Fire brings new colors to the forest. For some plants, fire is a source of life, not death. The ashes leave minerals in the soil that help the plants to germinate. In summer, the cooler, damper Alisio trade wind reaches the northern side of the island. The steep slopes block its progress. Rising air cools and condenses. Thick clouds flow into the parched forests. In places, magical forests have sprung up, a far cry from the arid volcanic desert. Life in here is determined by the clouds. The mist helps lichen, ferns, and moss grow on the trees. Here, the pine needles guarantee the existence of an evergreen paradise. The long, thin needles comb the clouds, creating water drops that fall directly onto the roots. On Fuerteventura, there are no mountain forests to be watered by the trade winds. Life here must withstand heat and drought. The cream-colored courser prefers running to flying. This graceful bird scans its surroundings for danger in an upright position, stretching its neck as high as it can. With its sand-colored plumage, it's almost invisible in the rocky scree. These birds lay their eggs in open terrain. The mother's soft plumage is their only protection in the harsh, stony desert. cream-colored coursers are shy, quiet birds. But mothers encourage their unborn chicks with delicate, high-pitched calls. Soon, the offspring will reply. But first, they must survive the most perilous period. Brown-necked ravens settle on an old volcanic cone. There's little to hunt in this landscape, but during the breeding season, the ravens target eggs and helpless chicks. The stone curlew does everything slowly to avoid drawing attention to itself. The brown-necked ravens continue to patrol the skies. When the courser feels threatened, it hunkers down, relying on its natural camouflage. Brooding mothers only move at the last possible moment to draw the ravens away from their eggs. But ravens are intelligent birds. They spot the slightest change in the surrounding landscape. Birds' eggs are easy prey. This time, the mother wasn't careful enough. She must watch as her brood is destroyed. For the others, the struggle for survival continues. This female is more fortunate. Her eggs have remained undiscovered so far. After 3 long weeks, the eggs will soon hatch. A winter storm has gathered in the North Atlantic. Now it sweeps the islands. Hurricanes whip the water into a frenzy. Temperatures drop below 0. A blizzard follows. Unheard of weather for the Canaries. The snow falls for days. Masses of cold air collide with the flanks of the high volcanoes. The fire mountains become a sea of white. Lower down, water cascades from the heights. The forest that usually survives on moisture from the clouds soaks up the excess water like a sponge. The colorful blossoms of the canary shrub mallow are bright spots in the monotonous green of the winter forest. There's a reason the plant has picked the winter to bloom. Its blossom attracts migrant birds. These plants have adapted to the pollinating birds. The chiffchaff is after the sweet nectar. As it reaches in, its head touches the plant's stamens, shaking the pollen loose, which it transfers to the next blossom. After days, the storm finally moves on. Temperatures rise rapidly. The snow will soon vanish, but for a while El Teide shows a very unfamiliar face. On Fuerteventura, too, the storm is over. The first cream-colored courser has hatched from its egg, wet, blind, and completely helpless. This young bird can't survive without its mother's warmth. But it'll have to leave the nest in just a few hours. The mother must now pay close attention to the brood. The second chick will hatch at any moment. These stone curlews hatched at dawn. They're still a little unsteady. Their only protection is the camouflage of their mottled plumage. A raven is particularly keen on freshly hatched chicks. It's watching for telltale movements. Meanwhile, the courser chick's feathers have dried. The young bird is determined to explore its surroundings. The parents are now especially attentive, surveying the landscape. The second chick emerges from its egg. This is a critical moment. The mother immediately removes the bright eggshell. It mustn't attract the attention of the raven. It's early morning, and the stone curlews begin to coax their young out of the nest. They're barely able to stand, but it's time to explore. Step by unsteady step, the freshly hatched chicks make their way over the stony ground. With one just 4 hours old, the courser chicks are also starting on their first journey. Using food as a lure, the parents lead their young as far from the nest as possible. It'll be 4 long weeks before they can fly, and the greatest danger will have passed. The erosion of wind and weather has smoothed the summits of the volcanoes. But Mount Teide, rising 7,500 meters from the seabed, is a spectacular sight. El Teide, the 3rd highest island volcano in the world. It'll continue to grow as long as it stays active beneath the surface. Between the islands, there are deep underwater canyons. Conditions here are ideal for the great marine mammals. Pilot whales are nomads. They cross the world's oceans in family groups. Each pod is led by a dominant male. His knowledge and experience decide the fate of his relatives. Some pilot whales have got used to the perfect conditions between the islands and stay here permanently. Whales are not the only marine mammals in the vicinity. Common dolphins cruise the seas in search of rich fishing areas, constantly communicating with each other. As befits a sophisticated society, pilot whales are also always in contact. Each family has its own dialect that it uses to coordinate its movements over great distances. The pilot whales have developed an extremely sensitive sonar system to detect prey. Although the whales spend much of their time on the surface, they mainly hunt large deep-sea squid. They can pinpoint their prey's location with great accuracy, even 800 to 1,000 meters below the surface. While diving, the whales work together closely. Once they vanish into the depths, their survival depends on their relatives. Shrieking gulls circle the Roque Chico de Samor. They breed in a large colony on this sheer rock rising out of the sea. The chicks hide, only showing themselves when the parents arrive with fresh food. The gull colony is a godsend for the El Hierro giant lizard. Without the gulls, the lizards would starve on the barren rock. The chicks are clumsy and vulnerable. The hungry lizards observe them from close by. Every minute, more adult gulls take off from the rock and fly away. Their destination? The high plateau on El Hierro, the mainland to this tiny rock. The plateau is home to a swarm of grasshoppers. Since biblical times, these Moroccan locusts have been considered a plague, but they're a blessing for the gulls that can simply grab them in their beaks. The great feast lasts a month, long enough to rear their young on nutritious insect protein. The gulls make their return journey laden with fresh food. An ornithological airlift ensures the chicks on the rock never go hungry. There are more grasshoppers than the chicks could possibly consume. Occasionally they'll have to wait. While the adult tries to bring up the remains of its prey. This is the moment the lizards have been waiting for. They eat whatever the gulls have left behind. There's more than enough insects to go round in this breeding season. The excess protein helps the lizards see out the rest of the year and even breed. It's the secret of their survival. Roque de Salmor gives them shelter. The breeding gulls do the rest. The Canary Islands are a small, fascinating world with an amazing range of climates, landscapes, and unique species. Animals and plants have entered into unusual partnerships on these remote islands. And life forms that have long disappeared elsewhere survive on the Canaries. The entire archipelago is a confined world where one aspect of life depends on another. But if just one element fails, the entire system could collapse. If that were to happen, the Canary Islands would return to what they were millions of years ago, a barren volcanic desert.